welcome to a new Harry's Garage video, and today's car is this, the very orange McLaren 720S Spider. Hard to tell it's a Spider from here because it's got a very clever folding hardtop. But I got this car in because recently I've had that Ferrari F8 Tributo in, and then that Lamborghini Huracan sort of over the Christmas period on extended loan. And I hadn't really visited McLaren for a while. We took that McLaren GT down to the south of France. That was the last time we did it. Not featured the 720 before. They actually rang up and offered the 765 LT, and I said no, I quite fancy the standard car, because I don't know if you look in the classifieds, these are starting to get very attractively priced, I think, for what they offer. And that Ferrari F8 Tributo, much as I enjoyed it, it did make me wonder just how close the McLaren was to it now, and hence the reason for this test. Now, price on McLarens. I'm going to go into a bit more detail on the pricing and what you actually pay, but I'm going to just give the headline figures now. This car on the road without extras, £247,990. That's quite a lot more than the coupe, but it does come with a little extra equipment, and it's a very clever folding roof. There's either 2 or 3 patents McLaren took out because of the mechanism on it. It's a very quick car as well, 212 miles an hour top speed, 202 if you have the hood down, which is just nuts. It does have a lot of extras on this car. That is typical of press cars, so it's not typical of a customer car, but press cars, they like to load them up. £72,400 of options on this car, which I will point out as we go round. And the other thing that interests me about this car is the Artura, the new hybrid V6 version, has been announced by McLaren. That's coming this year as well, but this is going to remain as the flagship car. Let's go and have a closer look. Now, one of those options was actually this colour, this McLaren orange. And it's a special paint option, and I think it's one of the better priced options because it's only £1,940 to have it in this orange. And yeah, it's a proper McLaren colour. You'll see the brake calipers are the same colour as well. But I can remember the covers coming off this car at the Geneva Motor Show in 2017 and really being surprised about the design of this headlight area and the fact that there's a radiator line at the back here, and it becomes this air scoop. And it's actually a really nice LED light here, detail, that gets completely lost in this sort of open hole. And it's all very techy. There's air rushing up here, feeding that same radiator there, and then if you come around the corner, that all then vents from the back of that radiator around here. So that was the big surprise. It gave us this very sort of big eyes, but with no sort of central focus. And I think the Ferrari F8 design and those sort of snake eyes is more successful than perhaps the 720S. But there's no doubting that this is McLaren's hours of wind tunnel research in this car, because it's full of these ducts. I'll explain these in a moment, but basically this is feeding the interior. But if you look down the side of the door, you've got this one feeding lots of air into the car. At the back here, massive cutout of the door here. Come round here, there's this other vent sort of exiting the air out of the wheel arch along the door as well. We just turned to the wheel, we've got carbon brakes as standard on this car, aluminium calipers, all in the aid of reducing unsprung weight. This is a 19-inch wheel at the front, 245, 35, 19 Pirelli P0s on this car. There's even, if you crouch right down, there's another great vent in here feeding more air into that engine, the V8 twin turbo engine at the back. Wheel at the back is up to 20 inch, so a different size, 19 at the front, 20 at the back, 305 now, 30 by 20. Carbon brakes again, aluminium caliper. Lots going on. If you remember when we had the F8, the rear spoiler was blown spoiler, it was fixed. This one just dances around when you're driving it. It acts as a DRS, it acts as a brake dam as well, it comes up. And the engine, unfortunately, is sort of lost, that you don't get to see the engine. The F8, Ferrari dress their engine, lots of carbon fibre. On this, you sort of peer in here. You can get it to light up red. I think that's an option, but it's a very potent twin turbo V8 by Ricardo who make it. And then the twin exhaust here as well. One of the wind-ups with this car is It has a sports exhaust, same as F8. It just seems another excuse to sell you an option. It's a very clever car. You think it's all about performance, but they've really thought how you might use this car. And I'll just show you a little trick at the back. If I press this button, there it goes. There's this very clever idea that if you want to use it for touring and you're dashing down to the south of France, as we all used to do, you can use this as a boot. Keep the roof up for the dash motorway down, 58 litres of extra luggage capacity there if you don't lower the roof. But just looking quickly inside this big carbon tub, here's the obvious rib of it. That's what's clever about the McLaren. No other cars in its range, the Lamborghini and the Ferrari, are conventionally constructed, while the McLaren is stuck with the carbon tub, just like they had on the Zonda, on the Ferrari Enzo, LaFerrari, all sorts of things. This is normally reserved for the hypercars rather than this class of car. I'm just going to pop the front bonnet. This is the most enormous hole for luggage. I think it's the biggest of them all, these front-engine cars, bigger than Huracan, bigger than the F8 Tributo. And if you look at those vents on top here, they're actually then going into the, this here and coming out and then feeding the cabin with air from there. So that's you know, the pollen filter and stuff like that. I'm always impressed with McLaren. They really think about the car and how you might use it. So what I'm going to do now, take it outside, take it for a drive. Yeah, all comes alive when you open the door, dash comes up, and yeah, pull left stalk. Yeah, it has this comfort mode, just about got used to, where it puts you in the previous seating position. Typical portrait, this central screen, and then this rotating one at the front, which is really fascinating. So battery 45 days. I find that quite a useful thing to have, half a tank of fuel, because you've got this option of two different dash layouts. So you can have this is a track version, reduced, more visibility out, although it just, you know, it only actually fills there, it doesn't give you that much visibility, but I think it's such a clever option. Lots of extras in here again. My crib sheet are just staggering, you know, £300 for the orange seat belts. Carbon fibre paddles, £1,980. But I mean, McLaren orange stitching on the seats is £2,500. Carbon fibre interior components, which I presume is the sort of the air vents and things, £7,720. It's got a 12-speaker audio system of £3,640, and the park assist, and you see when we put it in reverse, etc., £4,720. Just goes on, doesn't it? When you order a car, oh, it used to be so simple. Now it's gone to sleep, so the dash has gone down because it's got bored. Not surprised, really. Right, so let's see if we can wake it up if I press that. There we go. Dash all says, all right, we are going somewhere, are we? Good vents, have to say. Just been living with this car, you know, oddments. There's a little bit here. I've got my phone in there. I've got this little central thing, I'm guessing, yeah, charged, and to do the Apple Play, etc., all to come up here. And this very clever, we'll go into how this works, but this is their system to control all the powertrain handling, etc., with comfort, sport and track all on here. But you don't get it until you press active. Always, once you know your way around it, it's how you make the manual. I think it's very good. And you get this screen here that just gives tyre temperature. Variable drift control down here, not available because I'm not in track, but does make you wonder if that's the best thing to put up there. You know, my son was joking whether you needed to flash up your race license for getting access in it, put a code into. I am a BRDC member. Oh, but the wheel, oh, just such a lovely wheel. McLaren, the one they've got right from the start is just the driver involvement, how it, seat, steering wheel, visibility, ace. And this wheel is just exquisite. Not a button to be seen, beautifully shaped, lovely leather and stalks. So yeah, that's going around. I can just flick a paddle and get going. This one doesn't release its handbrake for some reason, not sure, it's probably in the settings somewhere, and off we go. Good muscle, flicks through the gears, dual clutch transmission, it's all clever stuff. So yeah, I'm going to head out onto some better roads, so you'll be joining us in a little bit. Right, everything's in normal. This is just, I've jumped in, set off. 60 miles an hour, comes up with a whiff of throttle, as you'd imagine, in his car with 720 horsepower and the most enormous amount of torque. It's 77 Newton meters. More refined than you expect. I did my usual decibel reading. This is the noisy bit of road, and it's around 76, so 2-3 decibels quieter than a 911 or something like that, which for a carbon tubbed extreme car like this is excellent, if not exceptional, really. So yeah, nicely refined. Gearbox works a treat in auto, so it's very easy, as all cars seem to be these days. Good information as well from the screen. The bit you have to remember with McLaren is 12 was their first car. That arrived in 2011. Yes, I know they did a sort of SLR, they did the McLaren F8, but a serious production car. When Ron Dennis said, we're going to make a Ferrari rival, take on Ferrari, that was only 10 years ago. And this is the point we're now at. So think of it as like 911 progression and how they've honed it. It's still got that proactive suspension link, which is so clever. It means the dampers are all linked with hydraulic pipe, and they talk to each other, and it means that you don't have to have anti-roll bars, which is a very good thing because it allows the wheel to be free to move as the suspension wants it, rather than fighting an anti-roll bar. And the other thing to remember about McLaren is everything is unique. Not like Aston Martin that uses Mercedes engines. Ferrari have been in the game forever, they have an engine, but they are sharing a little bit of technology with Maserati and Alfa Romeo. Little old McLaren is doing this all by itself, building carbon tub, having this bespoke engine from Ricardo, and gearbox as well. So you have to remember, and I give them a little bit of slack for that, because that is not easy in this day and age. And I was going to discuss price. It's sort of common knowledge that they have, if you buy a new 720S, it's not going to keep its money because you might hoped. But I don't know what sort of deals they are, so who knows what it is. And you see them now in the classifieds at 100 and something. If you want to buy a Spider, one of these today, I saw one of about 200 miles and it's about £180,000. Fair bit off. This thing with extras, I think it was 320,000, but it's all monthly payments, so we ignore all that. It's not as steep a depreciation. It is steep, but it's not as steep as all that, because there's always a deal to be done. But I think McLaren shot themselves in the foot when they launched that GT series, because suddenly you had a 570S, Spider if you wanted it, £150,000. They say, oh no, it hasn't got the trick suspension, it's lower horsepower, etc. Well, it still had a carbon tub, it still had the same gearbox, it's still twin turbo, it still was chuffing quick. All the journalists raved about it, but it was significantly cheaper. Ferrari, if you buy a 488 or an F8 Tributo, they don't sell you a 408 cheaper version of this, basically the same car. So I think McLaren have only got themselves to blame on the fact that the residuals are perhaps not what they wanted them to be. The plus side, as consumers, this is a very attractive car at 1-2 years old. That GT series is probably a mistake. I think they could have done something quite different, but I'll discuss that in a bit because I'm about to squirt it out the hill. Right, I'm still in normal mode. I have not pressed anything here, and I'm doing 32 miles an hour as I approach the D-limit side, and it's just starting to snow, which is nice. Right, here we go, flat down. Whoa! And it obviously lights up and it gets going. There is lag, I find, with this 720 engine. It has to be. It's a 4-litre engine, produces 720 horsepower. It has to get on boost to really deliver the goods. And to produce that much horsepower, it needs a fair bit of boost. It's absolutely fine once you're in the gears, but like that, waiting out of town, it's recognisable for the amount of turbo lag you get before it all wakes up, changes down a gear, and then there is no mistaking the performance once you get going. What I'd rather they'd done with the GT series was what Porsche have done, in that they have a turbo range, turbo S, high performance. That strikes me like this 720S. But imagine if that GT range was like the GT3s from Porsche, where they're normally aspirated, high revving and purer. I would have loved to see McLaren do that, sort of follow the Gordon Murray model of the T50 and do lightweight, normally aspirated, loads of rev, loads of sound. My goodness, that would have been a GT series, and it wouldn't have undermined this car. Right, let's try launch control. It's my duty to try it. It's a bit of a test, this bit of road, because it's quite bumpy where we set off from here, so it gives everything a bit of a test. Right, I made active, I'm on sport, I'm going to press launch, awaiting full throttle. Here we go. Yeah. That was quite a lot of opposite lock then. Yeah, it got confused on the surface there. That was a fair bit of opposite lock we put into that to keep it on the road. It's one of the things, isn't it, with two-wheel drive, there's only so much traction you can get, and there's this sort of, this sort of temperature. I go down this road because this is awful bit of tarmac. Germans would just throw their hands up on the amount of bumps and ridge and cars heading into the ditch here because of the camber. But my goodness, I'm getting so much information through this steering wheel. McLaren have stuck with this electro-hydraulic rack. They haven't gone to a full electric rack. It'll be interesting what they have to do it because of the safety issues with lane departure. If that comes mandatory in crash, they might well have to move to electric. I don't know. But again, celebrate the steering on a McLaren because it is top notch and way ahead of Ferrari with its quick electric steering. Lamborghini, unfortunately, that isn't nearly a patch on this. This is Lotus-like, the steering on one of these. And it's one of the trademarks of McLaren, and I'm really impressed the way they've stuck to their guns and kept with a hydraulic steering rack, because as a driver, you really benefit. Right now, I'm just going to put it to active, so that's sport on, handling and drivetrain, just energises things a bit more vocal, I think, from the sports exhaust as well. Here's this little compression, beautifully dealt with, absolutely precision across there. Oh, way it powers out there, beautifully natural around there, not telling the speed we're doing, fabulous. There's a horrible bump on the way out, incredible. F8 did not go through there like that, neither did the Huracan. Absolute 5-star chassis behaviour on this car. There is a little talk that this being a Spider, it's not quite as good as the hardtop coupe, because the 720S actually has carbon structure between the windscreen and the back that give it extra strength. Obviously, this being a convertible hasn't got it, but we're talking microns difference. Do you know, I am going to put the roof down. Right. Let's put the roof down. I'm going down to I can do this at up to 30 miles an hour. Off it comes. 11 seconds they say to do that. And a ping. There we go. Hope you can still hear me. Little bit drafty, but we are doing 60 now. Yeah, definitely doing 60 now. I'll take active out and it all calms down. Right, I'm going to put the roof up because I think it's time to do some conclusions on this car. Up it goes. I don't want very slick how that works, and it's got this thing that actually changes the colour. I can shade it right down or put it right back up and make it bright again. Very clever. Right, dislikes. Well, design, I suppose I'm just not quite in love with the design. F8, fabulous. Huracan, stand knockout. He's up against some pretty tough opposition. There's a sensibility and a purposeness about it, but I just still haven't got to like those big apertures at the front. Yeah, running costs. Servicing is expensive. The service packages are expensive if you want extended warranty, and my goodness, it likes to drink fuel. I'm at 12.4 mpg. I haven't seen above 14 mpg out of this. Okay, I haven't been sat on the motorway, and that GT, when we did sit on the motorway, was heading towards 30. There are some lights for this car. Right, and I'm just going to go into my bend, just going to quickly touch the gear, and it all comes alive. And those paddles that are on a rocker, so you can use either rocker to go up or down the gearbox, and on the way up, here we go. It's just wonderful to punt down a challenge road, because this steering is heavenly. It just reminds you, like those M cars I had in recently. They were better, good electric rats. They were nothing like the feel, perfect gearing and steering ratios. And then you've got a very clever chassis underneath you. Yeah, it hasn't got the locking diff at the rear, slip diff at the rear, but on road, as you drive it, so clever how I can use that proactive and have no anti-roll bars and just better ride than you ever expect from a 212 mile an hour missile like this. Yeah, performance. I'm enjoying it more than the F8. It doesn't feel quite as wild and crazy. Weirdly, and I looked at Evo magazine, they figured at 720S 5.6 to 100 miles an hour. To give you a sense of how fast that is, we also figured a Bugatti Veyron, and that did 5.8 to 100 miles an hour. So this is quicker than a Bugatti Veyron. We never thought we'd have that. It has too much performance, really, but it somehow it's accessible in a different way to the F8. I don't feel as though I need to push it quite so hard as I did with that car, so I'm enjoying it more. Then there's the practicality of it. I mean, it's ridiculous the same as this crazy McLaren, but to have those two boot areas, to have a roof that folds as efficiently as that, it's funny, isn't it, that they've thought about those sort of details when they were designing the car. Brakes deserve a special mention as well. I just love when you press them hard. One, it's a solid pedal, and two, I can see the wing come up in the back. They're just, well, what do you expect of carbon brakes done by McLaren? They've put a lot of work into them, obviously, but just with the aero working as well. Gearbox is doing trick stuff. This is just in sport. You can just hear it going through the gearbox, changing when you want. Sometimes I do it manual, sometimes I leave it to its own devices. It's 50-50 really. Gets it right most of the time. So yeah, in conclusion, out of a choice of F8, 720S or Lamborghini Huracan, which would I choose? Well, one, I think it beats the F8. If you'd handed me the keys to both of them, I would go for the 720S over the F8. There was nervousness, just didn't enjoy the F8 as much as I wanted to, and I hate the noise that turbocharged engine makes. Against the Huracan, big surprise, mighty close. They're sort of different cars. If I wanted a Spider, I'd buy the McLaren, because I can't fit in a Huracan Spider. If I wanted a coupe, I'd be so tempted with that Norman S aspirated V10 Howl Huracan, but it's mighty close between these two cars. Be interesting where the Artura takes us with its hybrid and V6 engine, where that goes. 720S, mighty achievement to put this amount of performance and make it accessible, and it makes me scratch my head why they do the Ultimate Series, the Sennas and that sort of thing, when there's so much available from this 720S. That's quicker than a Veyron anyway. How much performance do you want? Just wish they'd done that GT series with normally aspirated engine, 9,000, 10,000 RPM sort of car. I would have loved that as a junior to this. But there you go. That's my review of the McLaren 720S Spider. Mighty accomplished car, highly attractive second-hand proposition, pretty good new proposition as well. And hats off for McLaren for putting this much technology and doing it all in-house and making such an extraordinary driver's car just in 10 years. There you go. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, keep watching, keep subscribing. More videos coming along very soon.